Citroen advise that oil changes are done every 12,500 miles or 12 months. Personally, we tend to do oil changes at 9,000 miles as we believe that frequent oil changes is one of the cheapest ways to extend engine life. Step 1. Warm up that engine. So my plan for this engine warm up is just under 10 miles. Where I'll take the car from Landrin Dodwells up to Lanier, onto Cross Gates, and then back to Landrin Dodwells again. So I think this is the Grand Picasso, if I'm correct, with the automatic gearbox. Anyway, we're back home now. Now that the engine is hot and the oil nicely thinned and runny, we can take the car into the garage for the oil change. Although we need the oil hot so that it's thin and runny, it will be dangerously hot. So don't rush too quickly to get the oil out, as it would be over 80 degrees centigrade, which could burn bare skin. Other than a trolley jack and axle stands, you will need the following for the Citroen C4 Grand Picasso: 21mm socket for the sun plug, 27mm socket for the oil filter, an oil catch pan that can hold 10 litres or more, torque wrench to torque 34 Nm and 25 Nm, 5 litres of 5W30 low saps synthetic oil, and an oil filter element and new rubber sealing ring. So I'm going to be using 5 litres of this low saps 5W30 oil, and for the filter I'll be using a Wix WL7305A. So this is what you get. There's a new sealing ring there, and here's the actual element of the filter. Also note there's like a little dimple on the top with a little rubber washer on, or rubber seal. So you'll also need a 21mm socket for the sump plug, and also a 27mm socket for the actual removal of the oil filter canister, and also a torque wrench to do both those up. It's also worth having some rubber gloves or latex gloves. You'll also need a funnel to refill the oil back in, and also a drain pan. Since the oil filter is accessed from the top of the engine, we need to open the bonnet first. I'm going to just check the dipstick oil level before doing anything else, as I'd like to see if it's on max. If it is, I can simply drain the oil, measure it, and refill with the exact same quantity, and this way I know I won't be under or overfilling it if service information isn't readily to hand. Here's a photo showing the dipstick location and the oil filler cap. You can also just see the oil filter being visible. So when checking the oil, you must remove the dipstick first, give it a wipe clean, pop it back in, and then we should have an accurate reading. So looking at this, we can say that yes, it's at the maximum mark, which is good news. To get to the black plastic oil filter housing, we need to unclip the air intake pipe. This should be fairly simple to do. Here's a photo showing the pipe that needs to be removed. So it seems simple enough to do. Just push out these two plastic clips and pull the pipe backwards, and it seemed to just come away at the back. And there it is. This Picasso didn't have a plastic underpan, so not sure if they normally do, but as there wasn't one, I will pop a tray under at this point to collect any oil that may spill on removing the oil filter. There's the oil filter housing, and that requires a 27mm socket. So now using a 27mm socket, we can undo the oil filter housing. Now bear in mind this is full of oil, so what I tend to do is undo it by a few revolutions, and that lifts the little plug inside off the seat, and that then means the oil inside here can drain back into the sump. So don't remove it all the way, but just undo it by a good few revolutions so that oil can drain back in. So I've given it a couple of minutes now to drain. So now I'll fully remove the oil filter, and there's a couple of pipes that you may need to push out of the way. But here it comes, and there you are. And you can see the little plug on the end. That was the plug that we were wanting to let the oil drain through. And as you can see, very little oil spilled by using this method. I will now jack the car up using a jack on each sill. Since the car doesn't have an under tray and the drain sump is easily reached without going under the car, I won't be using axle stands like I usually do. So repeating this for each side, I'll use a trolley jack and just lift the car slightly off the ground so that I can get my oil container underneath to drain the oil. Now to drain the old engine oil. For this we will use a 21mm socket with a small breaker bar. So we can now take our 21mm socket and our oil catch pan and start to drain the oil. Now one thing that seems to be unusual with the sump on this car is that the actual sump plug is sunk into the sump pan. Now that may leave some dirty oil still inside. Now I have seen some videos where they actually try and pull this part down with like a hydraulic ram or something so you get all the oil out of the sump. But anyway, by keeping the car as level as possible, you should at least get as much oil as you can come out of the sump, like so. But obviously there must be some still in there. Now to replace the sump plug, and you should also replace the copper sealing washer, as this deforms on tightening to make the seal. The sump plug is tightened to 35 Newton meters. So using a new copper sealing washer, we can now put the sump plug back in and remove that oil. I'm going to measure the dirty oil to see how much has drained out, as I'm going to put back in the exact quantity that came out, as I know the level was on the maximum point on the dipstick. You wouldn't do this normally, but it's a good method if you were unsure of the quantity of oil for the car you were working on. I think this part can be speeded up, because all we're doing here is just measuring how much oil actually came out. So I'm just going to set my torque wrench to 35 Newton meters and just pop that onto the sump plug. So we know that's now done. So just going back to the oil that came out of the engine, I'm just going to measure it, and it's just under 4.5 litres. We can now take a closer look at the oil filter. We can remove the old rubber seal and dirty filter cartridge, replacing the old O-ring with the new O-ring, making sure it's seated correctly. Citroen say do not put the new filter element in at this stage. Now I don't know if I came over all weak on this day, but this filter is really tight. As you can see. That was handy. Where did that go? Let's make sure we don't leave that in the engine. So yes, that's very tight. Need to be quite strong to pull that out. You can see the little plug there that seals the oil into the housing. So I've given the housing a wipe out with some tissue, and we now need to remove the rubber seal. Now make a note of where this comes from, because you want to make sure you put it back in the exact same spot, otherwise you risk oil leaking out. So we get our new seal. Make sure we don't mix them up. I'm going to put a bit of oil on that, so that when I do put it back in, it should go in nice and smoothly without puckering the rubber seal at all. So it's easy enough just to line that up and gently stretch that around, and that looks okay. I'll give it an extra little squirt of oil just to make sure. Now at this stage it's tempting to put the new element into this part, but Citroen actually say you mustn't do that. You must put the element into the other part on the car. I spoke to Citroen about installing the new paper filter element, and they said it must be inserted into the base of the oil filter first, as the spigot must be lined up and pushed in. Then the black outer housing is pushed on and tightened to 25 Newton meters. So I'm going to apply some oil to the little spigot, because there's a little rubber seal on that we have to locate in the base of the filter housing. I'm also going to put a little bit of oil on the end to help the black housing go on. So that's the hole we need to put the spigot into. So we need to put that in first. So line that up. There's the spigot, and pop that into the hole. So that's now seated. So we can now put the black housing, outer housing on. You do have to push down quite hard as you do this. There we are. So set your torque wrench to 25 Newton meters. Tighten that up until we get the click. Double check. So that's in. Now to refill with nice clean oil. I used a low SAPS oil. If your car has a particulate filter, a low sulfated ash, phosphorus and sulfur oil is important to minimise blocking the mesh structure inside the DPF. So I'll speed this part up, but I was just doing a quick bit of maths to work out that if I took out 3/4 litre from my 5 litre container, what was left should be the exact amount that needs to go in the car, which was 4¼ litres. So I'll take out my 3/4 litre there, pop that to one side, and now I can fill the engine with the contents of the 5 litre one, and it will be the exact amount in theory. So it's worth using a funnel at this point, because you don't want to get oil all over the engine. Here you'll see why you should hold the oil container horizontally. Splop! That wasn't good. So by holding it vertically like I am now, you tend to get more glug glug glug. So it is sensible to actually hold it horizontally, and then it flows a lot better. So I've now got some cleaning up to do there. So we're going to get some tissue, and we will need to clean that up now. Not forgetting to put the cap back on. So now that the 5 litre container is empty, I can return the 3/4 litre that I took out earlier back into the container, and then we have that for topping up at a later date. Now run the engine for a short while to refill the now empty oil filter housing. Then we can leave the oil to settle back into the sump and do a final check on the oil level and ensure it's all correct. So just run the engine, make sure that the red light on the dashboard that indicates the oil pressure goes out, and then the oil filter housing should be full of oil again so that we can take an accurate measurement. Don't forget to pop the air intake hose back on. So it just pushes back in at the back and then pushes in on the 2 clips on the side. Now check the oil level on the dipstick. So to check the oil level, we remove the dipstick and wipe the end so it's all nice and clean. And then we can pop that back in and then withdraw it again and that should be an accurate reading. So as I can see there, it's on the maximum. I'll show that from a different angle now. There we are, and our highlight max. So give a final check that the cap's back on, the dipstick's in, and that the pipe's there before closing the bonnet. How to reset the service interval gauge. Switch the ignition off, press and hold the 000 button, switch the ignition on, keep button 000 press till 0 is displayed. Release 000 button and turn ignition off. So there's the 000 button. So I'll keep my finger pressed on that now and then put the keys into the ignition, turn the ignition on and still keep my fingers on that 000, and you can see the counter there at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and now it's reset. So if we now withdraw the ignition key and then take our finger off the button, and you can see it's now reset to 12,500 miles. It's also worth noting the mileometer reading here, so you can add that to the service book. With these filters, it's easy to inspect the old filter material for signs of metal particles. Certainly not essential, but can be worth a quick look as it might highlight future potential problems. It's definitely a messy job doing this, so definitely make sure you wear some gloves. Now I used a pair of old tin snips, and that cuts through the paper material quite easily. So you just go around and cut all the pleats at one end, and then what we'll do is we'll pull that end off and then do the same again on the other end, and then you should be able to unravel it all and just check for any metal particles that are in there. And it certainly looks clean. There's a couple of little bits that are twinkling, but on the whole that looks pretty clean. Here are some detailed photographs with labels to help with identifying all the visible parts. I will put them on for only 4 seconds with the idea that you can pause them for detailed viewing. Thank you for watching, and hope this helped other home mechanics out.